I've seen my fair share of dark stories, but this one, it stayed with me. Not because of how brutal it was, though it was, but because it began so quietly. A simple apartment, 2 men. One friendship that should have been ordinary until it wasn't. This is the story of Ethan Cole and the roommate who ended his life. When I first heard about Ethan, he sounded like the kind of guy you'd want as a neighbor. 29 years old, steady job at a local auto repair shop, lived in the town of Maplewood, Tennessee, quiet, safe, almost boring. He wasn't rich, but he worked hard, reliable, kind, always offering to help others even when he didn't have much himself. And that's probably why he agreed to take in a roommate, a man named Darren Michaels. At first, everything seemed normal. They split rent, shared meals, sometimes watched football together. From the outside, you'd never guess that apartment would become the scene of something so horrific. But the signs were there. They always are, you just don't notice them until it's too late. Darren had a reputation around town. People said he was short-tempered. When he drank, he got loud, sometimes violent. Ethan, on the other hand, was patient. Maybe too patient. He didn't tell his friends or family how bad it got. The yelling, the late-night arguments. The things that made neighbors roll over in bed and whisper, "Not again." When his sister Maya called on Sundays, he'd brush it off. "Yeah, Darren's kind of a handful," he'd say. "But it's fine." Except it wasn't fine. It hadn't been fine for weeks. Then came Friday, September 8th, 2023. It was one of those humid Tennessee nights where the air sticks to your skin. The rain had stopped, but thunder still grumbled in the distance. Ethan came home from work, exhausted. Found a letter from the landlord on the kitchen table, rent overdue. His half was paid, but Darren hadn't contributed in months. And that was the breaking point. "I can't keep covering for you," Ethan told him. "You said you'd have it this week." Darren, already half drunk, shot back, "You think you're better than me? Just because you've got your little job?" The argument spiraled. Voices rose, a chair tipped over, something crashed. Then, silence. I've listened to the 911 tapes. I've read the reports. No one called the police that night, but neighbors said they heard what sounded like a struggle, then a heavy thud. Somewhere between rage and regret, Darren Michaels crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. He grabbed a wrench, one of Ethan's tools from work, and struck him. Once, then again. And in a matter of seconds, Ethan Cole was gone. When Darren realized what he'd done, panic took over. He wrapped Ethan's body in a tarp, dragging it to the bathtub. He sat there for hours, shaking, chain-smoking, muttering to himself. By dawn, panic turned into something colder. Calculation. He drove to a convenience store, bought bleach, trash bags, gloves, and lighter fluid. All captured on CCTV. Later that night, behind an old sawmill on the edge of town, locals saw smoke rising from the trees. They thought it was just someone burning garbage. They were wrong. By Monday morning, Ethan didn't show up for work. He never missed a day. His co-workers called his phone, no answer. By Tuesday, his sister reported him missing. Detectives arrived at the apartment. Darren answered the door, acting calm, too calm. He told them Ethan had packed up and moved to Nashville. Said he wanted a new start, but Detective Laura Grayson, the lead investigator, wasn't buying it. The apartment smelled like bleach. The carpet near the kitchen was freshly scrubbed. When she asked to see Ethan's room, Darren hesitated just for a second, but it was enough. And when she stepped inside, she noticed something faint and dark under the dresser leg. Blood, the kind that doesn't wash away. That small stain changed everything. Because within days, investigators would discover that Darren's story, every part of it, was a lie. And the truth waiting to be uncovered was far worse than anyone imagined. I remember thinking, he really thought he could get away with this. But secrets have a way of rising to the surface, just like smoke. And when detectives found what he tried to burn, there was no coming back from it. I've always believed the truth can hide, but only for a while. And in this case, it hid behind fire and ash, the kind of fire you can't put out with water. Detective Laura Grayson didn't waste time. She brought Darren in again, this time for a longer interview. He was nervous, kept scratching his hands, shifting in his chair. When she asked when he last saw Ethan, he looked down and said, "Friday night." He said he was heading to Nashville. New job or something, but Grayson could read liars. She noticed the bruise on his arm circular, like he'd been hit by something heavy, and the soles of his shoes, stained red-brown. When she asked to collect them for testing, he tensed. "You think I did something?" he asked. "We're just trying to find your roommate," she replied. 2 days later, a man walking his dog behind the old sawmill made a call that would break the case open. He said he smelled something strange, burnt plastic mixed with something worse. When detectives arrived, they found the remains of a fire pit. Inside, melted debris, scraps of tarp, metal fragments, and something that looked like bone. The team worked all night. Under the soot and ash, they found a partially melted phone case, a watch band, and a small keychain engraved with 2 letters, EC. It didn't take a genius to figure out whose initials those were. DNA tests came back fast. The remains belonged to Ethan Cole. The news hit the town like a storm. Ethan's sister collapsed when detectives told her. His co-workers at the garage built a small memorial, laying flowers by his workbench. And somewhere in a holding room, Darren Michaels still thought he could lie his way out. With the new evidence, police returned to the apartment. This time, they weren't asking. They tore up the carpet, lifted floorboards, searched every inch. They found blood beneath the new rug soaked deep into the wood. They found burned clothes in the trash and a broken wrench with traces of DNA. The forensics didn't lie. Ethan Cole was killed right there, in his home, the place he thought was safe. When they brought Darren back in, the tone changed. "Detective Grayson, we found the burn site, Darren. The lighter fluid. Your fingerprints are on the cans. Darren, you're making a mistake. Grayson, you were caught on camera buying them. We have it all," he broke. At first, he said it was an accident, that Ethan came at him first, that he just snapped. But then he started describing things no one should ever hear. How he dragged the body to the bathroom, how he cut it up to make it easier, how he drove to the sawmill because it was quiet, no one goes there at night. And when asked if he felt any remorse, his answer was almost casual. "I didn't think anyone would miss him that much." That line, it still echoes. The next morning, Darren Michaels was arrested for first-degree murder. The sheriff's statement hit the local news. 32-year-old Darren Michaels has been charged with the murder and desecration of the remains of his roommate, 29-year-old Ethan Cole. I remember the photo they released Darren in handcuffs, head down, face pale. He didn't look like a monster. But evil rarely does. The town of Maplewood changed after that. People started locking their doors again. Neighbors whispered about how quiet the apartment had been since. At Ethan's garage, a framed photo of him still hangs above his old workstation. Someone scrawled underneath it in marker, "You'll always be part of this team." Detective Grayson said she'd never forget that case, because it wasn't about greed or revenge. It was about something smaller, uglier, that turned deadly. Pride, anger, and the inability to walk away. The fire behind the sawmill told the story Darren tried to hide. Every bone fragment, every stain, every lie, they all pointed to the truth. And in the courtroom, that truth would finally speak for itself. Justice doesn't erase the horror. It doesn't bring the dead back. But sometimes it's the only thing that helps the living breathe again. For Ethan Cole's family, that justice came slowly and painfully. It had been nearly a year since Ethan's murder. By the time the trial began, the town of Maplewood had moved on, at least, on the surface. But inside the courtroom, you could feel the weight of it. The quiet hum of reporters setting up cameras, the muffled sobs of family members, the sharp click of the judge's gavel echoing off cold walls. I was there the day Darren Michaels walked into court, wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists shackled. He looked smaller than before, pale, unshaven, eyes hollow. No one said a word as he took his seat beside his lawyer. At the other end of the room sat Ethan's sister, Maya Cole. Her hands trembled as she clutched a framed photo of her brother, the same one that hung above his toolbox at the garage. The contrast between them, the killer and the victim's family, said everything words couldn't. The prosecution wasted no time laying out the evidence. They showed photos from the apartment, the blood-soaked floorboards, the wrench, the bleach bottles lined under the sink. They played security footage from the convenience store showing Darren buying lighter fluid and trash bags. The jury sat stone-faced. Some turned away when the forensic photos appeared on screen. Then came the medical examiner's testimony. Dr. Helen Porter described Ethan's injuries, multiple blunt force traumas to the head, consistent with being struck by a heavy object. He was already dead before his body was dismembered and burned. The room went silent. Even Darren looked away. Darren's attorney tried to argue heat of passion, claiming the killing wasn't premeditated, that it was an accident during an argument. He said Darren panicked after realizing what he'd done and that he didn't mean to hurt Ethan. But it's hard to argue panic when you buy lighter fluid and garbage bags the next morning. The prosecutor tore through that defense like tissue paper. He looked the jury dead in the eyes and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this wasn't panic. It was cleanup." And in that moment, you could see it, the shift. The jurors leaning forward, the silence tightening. The realization that what Darren did wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice. Then came the part that broke everyone. Maya took the stand. Her voice shook at first, but she steadied herself. "Ethan was my best friend," she said softly. "He called me every Sunday. We used to joke that even if the world ended, he'd still find a way to check in." She looked at Darren across the courtroom, not with hatred, but disbelief. "He trusted you," she said. "You lived with him, ate with him. He helped you when no one else would. And you killed him because of rent." You could have heard a pin drop after that. Even the judge looked down, eyes heavy. It's one thing to read a crime scene report, it's another to watch grief speak for itself. After 2 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 6 hours. When they came back, everyone knew. The foreman stood. "We find the defendant, Darren Michaels, guilty of first-degree murder and abuse of a corpse." Maya covered her face and sobbed. Darren didn't move. Not a twitch, not a tear. The judge's voice was steady when he delivered the sentence. "For the murder of Ethan Cole, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck once sharp and final, and just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, rain began to fall, gentle, almost cleansing. Reporters huddled under umbrellas, shouting questions that no one wanted to answer. Maya didn't speak to the press. She just stood there for a long time, staring at the courthouse steps. When she finally did speak, her words were simple. "He didn't just take my brother's life, he took our peace. But at least now, Ethan can rest." Those words stuck with me. Because that's the cruel thing about justice, it doesn't bring peace. It just stops the bleeding long enough for people to start healing. Darren was transferred to Riverbend Maximum Security Institution about 50 miles away. Inmates said he kept to himself, rarely spoke, avoided eye contact. Sometimes he'd pace his cell for hours, whispering to himself. Others said he kept a photo of his mother on the wall, nothing else. No one visited him after the sentencing, not even his family. And maybe that's the quiet punishment no one talks about being forgotten. A year after the trial, Detective Laura Grayson returned to the old apartment. The landlord had renovated it, new floors, fresh paint, different tenants. But she said when she stood in the kitchen, she could still feel the weight of it, the echo of something terrible that once happened there. When I asked her what stayed with her most, she said this: "It's not just what he did, it's how easy it was for him to do it." And that's the part that chills me too. Because Darren wasn't a monster hiding in the shadows. He was just an ordinary man, someone who smiled, laughed, made small talk. Until one night, anger became murder. We all like to believe we'd see the warning signs, that we'd know if someone close to us was capable of something so dark. But the truth? You never really know the people you live with, not until something breaks. Ethan Cole trusted his roommate. He believed in second chances, and it cost him everything. Today, his story is a reminder not all monsters hide under beds. Some live right down the hall. My name's not important. But stories like this are, because if telling them makes even one person pay attention, one person trust their instincts, then maybe Ethan's death won't be forgotten. This is Maplewood's darkest chapter, the story of a friendship turned fatal, and a fire that couldn't hide the truth.